Guys, it's certainly a pleasure for me to come down here today and visit with you. Our staff certainly appreciates all the people in the coaching profession who helps us be successful. All the things that we talk about today have been learned from somebody else. Some of them high school coaches, some of them college coaches, some of them pros coaches, some of them players. And we appreciate what you do in developing athletes, football players, and attitudes that help us in college to be successful. And because of that, I want you to know that anything that we can do for you at Michigan State University, our staff would be more than happy to share with you any information that we have, spend time with you if you'd like to visit. We'd just like to welcome you to come to Michigan State at any time. And it's not that far from here. It's a beautiful place, and we'd love to have you. And we have a good staff of people who are really good about spending time with visiting coaches. We would like to help you any way that we can professionally. So don't hesitate to ever ask. The first thing that I'm going to talk about today here is developing attitude in players, developing a team concept in a team. And I think the experience that we've had probably in college and then to go into pro football, take a team that was the worst defensive football team the year before and gave up a record number of points in the National Football League, and 4 years hence had the best defense in the league and the fewest number of points given up by any team in the league, and the fifth or sixth fewest in the history of a 16-game season. So that took a lot of attitude development individually and collectively with the players. Now, first of all, I'm going to talk about individually how we need to motivate people, or try. I think that it's always better to motivate in a positive way. I think that it takes a certain amount of character to be successful. I think it takes a certain amount of self-discipline to actually have character. Character, to me, are the kind of decisions that we all make when no one else is around. Example that I like to use with our players is there's a four-way stop outside my office. When the police are sitting on the corner, everybody always stops. But there are people who don't when that phantom police car is not there. And the decision that you make when you're away from us, whether you're going to dissipate and make the wrong decisions about the things that you do, whether it's handling your personal life, how much you eat, how much you work out, what your willingness to be successful is, all those decisions are what is your true internal character. If you don't have self-discipline, you won't be able to make those correct decisions. So that's very, very important in any program and any individual. Now, some of you who coach in the high school level obviously can't pick and choose who you have to coach. And believe me, we really respect that fact. We have an opportunity to do that at the college level because we can choose who we recruit. You can at the pro level as well because you can choose who you draft or sign as a free agent. But everyone does not have the kind of character and self-discipline that they need to be a successful person. And I think you have to try to develop that. A lot of people say, how do you discipline your team? I was just at a meeting yesterday with the Board of Trustees that says we need a student code for student athletes of conduct at this university, which is probably true. I think at the NCAA or Big Ten level, we probably do need something like that. But the reason we need something like that is probably because we have too many individuals coming out of high school who don't have the social behavior discipline to function in a society like a major college. And I think this has been the case for years and years and years. But discipline is not always punishment, is the point that I tried to make with them. That just eliminating opportunities does not always create discipline. To me, discipline should be structured in a way that it has an opportunity to change behavior, because then you're doing something positive. The number one thing that I think you need to develop in your team and your individual players is they need to know what they want to accomplish. That's the number one thing. You can establish goals for your team. You can establish goals for your offense. You can establish goals for your defense. But to me, to be successful, you have to know what you want to accomplish. That's going to make something important for you to do, because you want the players to do it because they enjoy doing it, they want to do it, they have some ownership in it, and they feel a part of it, and they're going to get positively reinforced when they make a commitment to it. But you can't accomplish anything if you don't know what you want to try to accomplish. And if you need to sit down and try to get them to make some commitments, then you need to do that. And you need to take the time to do it, because to me, attitude development makes all the difference in the world. But if a young man knows what he wants to accomplish, he'll have the desire, which will give him the willingness to work and invest his time in what he needs to do to be the best he can be at that. It'll also give him the willingness to persevere and stick with it, learn from his mistakes, so he can continue to grow in a positive direction. I think that players, that's the starting point, because at least you're getting the work ethic that you need, and people aren't getting discouraged every time things don't go the way they should. And believe me, these young men have to overcome a lot of adversity. Yours do, ours do, everyone does. I mean, I think Bob Tucker here we were at Ohio State together. The greatest speech that I ever heard given, Woody Hayes gave to our team before we went to play Michigan. I think it was 1981. We were like 17-point underdogs. They had a great team that year. They had 5 All-Americans on offense, Butch Woolfolk and Bubba Paris and all kinds of players. And we didn't have much of a chance to win. In fact, by winning, we ended up going to the worst bowl game. We would have done a lot better if we'd have lost the game, because no one thought we were going to win. So when we won, we didn't really have a bowl game to go to. No one ever thought of that. But Woody's whole speech was about overcoming adversity, and that there can be no great victories without a tremendous amount of adversity to overcome to make it a great victory. And he talked about all the adversity that our particular team had, the bad weather, being underdogs, playing in Ann Arbor, all those things, and he equated it to the war in the Pacific, which I can't do because I'm not the history buff that he once was. But it was a great speech, and I've never seen a group of players so zeroed in and relate to that. And we went there and played a great game and won the game 14-9. He also said after the game to the coaches, "I'm glad we don't play anybody next week, because I don't think there's a team in the country we could beat next week." Because we really did play ass over tin cup. I mean, tea kettle, just got after it and played great and played with a lot of heart. But overcoming adversity, learning from mistakes is very, very critical. And I think coaching is teaching. But as coaches, you can find yourself criticizing a player almost every play. I had a young man do a study on me as a coach when I was coaching the secondary in Cleveland, and he was getting a master's degree in psychology or something at one of the schools around Cleveland, and he said, "I'm going to do a study on how many positive things you say to players and how many negative things you say to players during the course of practice." And as coaches, we can become critics, and as critics, I think sometimes you can become negative. And I don't think people respond as well to negative teaching as they do to positive teaching. Now, if any of you have seen me coach, we get after guys pretty good. But we've already established the expectations for what we expect from them, and they in turn agree that they're not living up to those expectations or standards or commitments that they made prior to that. So having the ability to learn from your mistakes and overcome adversity is very important to me. One thing that we had to overcome on our team in Cleveland and our team at Michigan State, when we played Nebraska this year, and they kicked our ass like a redheaded stepchild now, 50-10. And Tom Osborne says after the game, he says, you know, Coach, you have a better team than you think. And when they beat Florida 64-20 or whatever that game was, I said, you know, he's probably right. We were a little bit better, and that was about as close a game as they had all year. But our players did not believe that they could win that game. There's no way that we believed that they could win that game. We had self-imposed limitations on what we could accomplish as a group. There's no question about that. There was a guy that I grew up with. His name was Shockey Males. He's the best free safety I've ever seen in West Virginia. Played at Fairmont State. Went to Vietnam, and he was one of those guys that chased the guys through the jungle and cut their fingers off and then wore them on his belt. That's the kind of mentality he was. And that's how he played free safety, too. But he got captured over there, and they put him in what he called a tiger cage. And it was a cage about as big as this, because they didn't have prisoner of war camps everywhere, so they put the prisoners in little cages like this so they could move them when they went different places. They just moved them and took them with them like a dog in a cage. Said it was the most restrictive situation and circumstance I've ever been in my life. I said, how'd you survive it? He said it was very difficult, took a lot of mental toughness, and all that type of thing. And he said it was very, very limiting. And I said, well, what's it like when you came back to the United States? What do you see in people? He says, I see a lot of people that wear one of those cages right on their head. And I says, what do you mean by that? And he says, there's so many people that have so many self-imposed limitations on themselves, what they can accomplish and what they can do. It's unbelievable, because he was in an experience that he had to overcome so much to stay alive in a circumstance and a situation that it was so easy for him to see the limitations that people put on themselves and what they could and couldn't accomplish. And I think, you know, that's very important. There was a guy that I used to watch fish in West Virginia. And the guy used to throw back the big fish and keep the little fish. And finally I asked him, I said, why do you throw back the big fish and keep the little fish? And he says, because I only have a 9-inch frying pan, which to me in itself is putting a lot of limitations on himself as a fisherman, right? There's only so much that he was going to allow himself based on the frying pan. And it's a simple story, but I know that our team had those. They did not believe in themselves. They didn't think they could win. They had been beaten too many times before. Their expectations was not for things to go well and to play to win, but their expectations were for things to go wrong and they would lose. And some kind of way, you have to throw this tiger cage away and build confidence in your players. And I think losing begets losing and winning begets winning. But if you positively reinforce, I think you have a much, much better chance to succeed in this way than if you just get on people all the time and you're critical. I think, and you have to coach every individual a little bit different. Can't treat everybody the same. It's probably the biggest difference between coaching college football and coaching professional football, which probably professional football has more similarity to high school football in terms of the coaching, because when the owner pays the guy the money, you got to coach him. If he can't backpedal and he has to play in a half turn, you better be able to teach him how to play in a half turn. So that's just the way it is. Just like when you get a guy that comes out for football, if he's the only right corner you got, then you got to teach him how to play right corner the best he can play right corner. And he may not be able to play it like Frank Minifield played it the year before, or Hanford Dixon played it the year before. Because Everson Walls was good in his own way, Donnie Griffin was good in his own way, but none of them could play with Frank Minifield's style. And I think you guys have to do that, but you have to be able to recognize those styles and differences. And I'm using an example of physical ability and physical style. You still have to approach an individual the same way from a mental standpoint. Every guy's different. What it took to get Michael Dean Perry to play was different than what it took to get Eric Turner to play. What it took to get Pepper Johnson to play was different than what it took to get Anthony Pleasant to play. But in the end, I always sat down and talked to them and made them make commitments of things that were important to them in terms of what they wanted to accomplish. Even if it was to get terms, P.O. Sagapulatelli, San Diego State, go to work them out, go talk to the weight coach. The weight coach says, I can't say much good about this guy. In fact, to be honest with you, if he was on fire, I wouldn't piss on him to put it out. Now that is as bad as endorsement as anybody has ever gotten from a weight coach that I ever went to work a player out. He was a Hawaiian guy, came from a bad neighborhood over there, was 6'6", about 300 pounds, had some vertical push up the field, a little stiff, but strong guy. So I talked to him at San Diego State, and I said, you know what, you can play in the National Football League, but you fight all the time, you get a lot of penalties, you're undisciplined, you haven't responded very well to the people here who have tried to help you. They don't endorse your character or you as a human being. And you expect me now to go back and tell the people at the Cleveland Browns that we should invest money and time in you as a football player. And he said, Coach, if you do it, I'll never be a problem. I'll never be a problem. I said, if you make that commitment to me that you'll never be a problem, I'll go back and tell the people that we'll take you. We took him in the 6th round. He's still on the team. He's always been a good backup, solid backup player for us. He's never been cut, and he's never been a problem. Never been in a fight, never got in a fight in practice. They couldn't have practice there because he'd fight every play. So sometimes you can create terms with players that gets them to do things the way you'd like to do them for the betterment of the team, and also enhances their performance because they can't continue if they don't change. They can't continue if they don't change. I think this kind of approach, always trying to steer the positive, will help create confidence and self-esteem and a good feeling about an individual that I think is important initially in trying to develop character in a person to be successful. And I think that's what we're all trying to do. I think you try to do it in your program, wherever you coach. We try to do it in our program, is to create an atmosphere that the players have the best chance to be successful in. Not only as players, but as people, and as students, and as athletes, and hopefully what you do is helping them develop a career for themselves someday outside of football. I think that's what coaching really is all about. That's the intrinsic reward we probably all get from doing it when we see those things happen and we see how we help people in a positive way. So that's really important from our standpoint. Now, getting off of the individual and going to the team. I think teamwork is the essence of life, basically. And football is probably the greatest team game of all the games, with 22 players on the field at once. I think the first thing that all these individuals have to do, and it's tougher and tougher and tougher because I think people are more selfish and self-centered all the time. My own children are selfish and self-centered because they are spoiled. And I'm not sure how not to do this, but the first thing that these people have to do to be a part of the team is you have to suppress your own self-ego for the good of the team. That's the only way you can give the proper respect to the other people that you have to participate with. You cannot worry about yourself first. You have to give that up. Being a part of the success has got to be more important than you being personally indispensable as a part of the team. And some players enjoy that status. And sometimes you have to take it away from them so they see that we can win without you. You really do. being a part of the success of the team has to be more important than your own personal, you personally being indispensable or trying to reach a status with the other players on the team that you are indispensable. I think if you can do that, then the team can actually develop a personality of its own. There can be a genuine enthusiasm, and they can have a respect for one another I think they need to have a successful team. Selfish behavior must be set aside. It's got to be. And if you're looking for it, you can see it all the time. You can see it all the time. And players will test you all the time. And the better the player, the more they'll test you. Just like those 4 guys that didn't get on that bus at 1 o'clock in the morning in Shreveport, Louisiana. That was the curfew. The reason we suspended them and didn't start them in the game and held them out for a quarter is because they were there, they chose not to come back. They didn't miss the bus. They made a conscious decision to stay out later than the law allowed. So to me, the only way, and they thought that because it's Scotty Green and because it's a starting middle linebacker and different things like that, starting strong safety, that we wouldn't do anything about it. Sometimes those guys felt like they were indispensable to the team and didn't have to do what everybody else had to do to be a part of the team. So they didn't start in the game. Didn't hurt us. We were ahead when they went in the game. Then things fell apart later. But I think that's very important. Now here's the one thing that kills every organization. And this came from Pat Riley's book, and if you haven't read it, you should. Bill Parcells has a great book out right now, too, for coaches, I think in terms of attitude and philosophy. Both books are extremely positive books that I think will help you. But he has something that he calls the disease of me. And I think we all have this to some degree. It's your own personal ego. But people who create 20% of the success or results want to get 80% of the credit. And that can kill any organization faster than anything. It can kill any team faster than anything. And it's only human nature to want to get recognition. It's only human nature. And that's probably not wrong in any way, but not at the expense of somebody else. And if you're successful, there should be enough credit to go around for everyone. Enough to go around for everybody. And because of the success of the team, then the individual notoriety comes about. 1990, the New York Giants won the Super Bowl. Had 9 players on defense make the Pro Bowl. The next year they went, I don't know, about 500, 8-8 or something. Maybe it was 7-9. They had 1 player make the Pro Bowl. Always use that example with the players to try to get the idea that the team success was more important than the individual. There's a lot of people in this category here that have an ego that they can never be wrong, which I think if you're wrong, you should admit that you were wrong and go on and learn from there. But they can never be wrong because they never do anything. But when somebody else does it, they're the first one in line to take the credit for it. Now that'll kill you more than anything, I think. Whether it's your coaches that do it, your athletic director that does it, the principal of the school, I don't care who it is. I think this comes, and we had some of this on our team this year, because these guys hadn't had much success. We're 6-3-1 going into the Penn State game, and actually outplay Penn State, but because we don't know how to win in the end, we can't win. We don't win. We lose on the last play of the game. But inexperience with dealing with success can be a problem in this area because people have never been exposed to that kind of reinforcement. And it can be a problem in terms of how they handle it. people feeling like they're unappreciated, like what they do is not appreciated. Sometimes that's justified because we may not be reinforcing them enough, but when they have that feeling, they're really saying to you, I'm not getting as much credit as I deserve, which is a selfish deal. Paranoia over being cheated out of what is rightfully yours. Paranoid that somebody else is trying to take what you feel should be yours. I'm not talking about items now. I'm talking about attention. Resentment against the competence of your partners. In other words, because you want the credit, you don't really want to see another person do well. Because you don't want them to get any credit. Which that's all goes back to this disease that'll kill your organization. Personal efforts solely to outshine your teammates. Your motive to do well is to be better than somebody on your team so that you can outshine them rather than for the betterment of the team itself. A leadership vacuum that results from cliques and rivalries on your team. And look, our team in Cleveland in year 3 was destroyed. As much as we had great chemistry in year 4, in year 3 we were 5-2, 7th in the league in defense, doing fairly well. We have a bye week. We cut Kozar, David Brandon, who's a starting outside linebacker, and Everson Walls, who was really kind of looked up as a leader in the secondary, a very positive guy. We lost the next 5 games in a row. Not because we were playing with worse players, we weren't. It totally destroyed and divided the chemistry of the team. And there was this group over here that thought we should have. This group thought we shouldn't have. You know, we picked up Pepper Johnson and cut these 2 guys to get the money to pay him, so they didn't like him. And I mean, it was a mess. Almost made me have a nervous breakdown, I'll be honest with you. I mean, it was a mess. When you have to deal with those kind of attitudes because of divisiveness that divides your team. Because everybody had a different deal. Feeling of frustration even when the team performs successfully. If you think, I'll bet you everybody in here played some kind of ball sometime. I mean, we're all coaches. We all played something. I can't say that when I go through this, that honestly, as a competitor and a player, I haven't felt that to some degree at some time. Any of those 7 things. So I'm sure that you can understand what I'm talking about. I mean, I know you've all had a player on your team, you just win the game and you had to come in and say, what's wrong, man? Get your head up. We just won. We won the game. Well, I didn't think I played that well. Well, what does that tell you? It's not bad that the kid's disappointed in his performance, but still, the number one objective is what? To win the game and be successful as a team. So I think that's a problem. I think there's some other things that are really important in coaching and consistency and developing a team, and I think the one thing is integrity. To me, integrity is you stick to your principles as a person and an organization. And if you don't have principles, you can't have integrity because you have nothing to apply it to. I mean, it's like driving and not having a road map. You cannot have integrity if you don't have principles and principles in your organization that you have to live by. Now, that doesn't mean that you aren't flexible. It doesn't mean that you aren't flexible. You have to be flexible. Bill Belichick has integrity in terms of what kind of players he wants. He wants big guys. That's his philosophy. Power. People that can wear the other guy down in the 15th round and he can't hold his arms up anymore. That's the kind of football team Bill Parcells wants to have. That's how the Giants were in 90. But that's not how they were in 86 when they won. They passed the ball a lot more. They had Joe Morris playing instead of Otis Armstrong. Big difference. Or Anderson. But I think integrity is the only way that you'll have the respect of your team. And you've got to have principles. It's really important. I think you've got to be flexible so that you play to your team's strengths all the time. I mean, this year we had to throw the ball. And I can sit here and complain to you about the mistakes that Tony Banks made as a quarterback in a couple games and be mad about it. But the fact of the matter is with the players that we had, an inability to run the football because of an offensive line that couldn't get movement, not a very good defensive team, even though they played hard. We were small, couldn't stay on the line of scrimmage and all that stuff. We had 3 good wideouts, 2 good runners, and a good quarterback. The only way we were going to win is if the quarterback had the opportunity to do the things that he needed to do in the game to score points, to utilize the skill players, spread the defense out. And if he played poorly, we couldn't win another way. And it's not good to have to play that way, but we were trying to play to our team's strengths. I mean, and to me, we sometimes change things that don't need to be changed as coaches. You call a defense, it works. You call it again, it works. Then you change it, and they hit something on you. Why did you change? If you know the guy can't hit your fastball, I mean, I keep throwing it for 27 outs. Why would you not keep throwing it? Why would we outsmart ourselves? Now, there's some things that we always try to get from our players. Expectations. Call them intangibles, if you will, but they're really not intangible. They're really parts that are important. Takes no ability to do any of the 3 of these things. Number 1, every player's got to give effort. Takes no ability to give effort. There's no one that ever said you had to run a 4.5 to give effort and try hard. Every play. And you establish the standard as a coach. 2, you cannot play football if you don't have mental and physical toughness. It's just a simple fact. It takes a lot of physical toughness to play, and to me, mental toughness is being able to deliver when the game is on the line. You don't choke. You don't start thinking about what's going to happen and how we're going to play to keep from getting beat rather than to keep playing to win. That, to me, is mental toughness. I don't remember the guy's name, but I watched a guy last year in Orlando in the championship miss 4 foul shots in a row, and he was an 80% free throw shooter in the last 2 minutes of the game. Did anybody else see that besides me? I mean, a long time ago. It was last year. The guy choked. I mean, the guy's a hell of a player, and he's an 80% shooter from the free throw line, but he missed 4 in a row, and missed them bad. Almost air balls. That does not reflect mental toughness to me, to be able to deliver, concentrate when the game is on the line. That's very important. But toughness, guys, is not a physical talent. It's a mental attitude. Be responsible for your own self-determination as a player. In other words, you have to know what you are supposed to do and know how it affects the team if you don't do it. That's a responsibility. So you don't make mental mistakes. You don't have to high jump, vertical jump 37 inches to be responsible for what you're supposed to do. When I was at Michigan State before, we had two of the most opposite middle linebackers you could ever have. Shane Bulla, both are from Ohio, in fact. Shane Bulla played at Cincinnati, a good Moeller. His dad was always a coach. He was a 3.5 student. He was a 6'1", 212-pound, 5-flat middle linebacker. Tough, smart, knew the defense better than I knew it. Made the checks and adjustments quicker than I could see them. And he was outstanding in his own way. The guy that took his place was Percy Snow, who was much more talented, much more natural explosion and power, could run 4.7, weighed about 230 when he was a freshman, 245 when he was a senior. He was not the smartest guy in the world, but his responsibility to knowing what he was supposed to do and the pride that he had in himself to make sure that every day that he went on the field, the other players would not think that he wasn't the leader, and he made himself know it every day. Even if you had to sit in that meeting for an extra half hour to say, if they're in fullback, halfback week, we're going to check this or that or whatever, because we defended a lot of sets in those days. Two totally different guys, got the same results in a totally different way, but they were responsible to their own self-determination and made sure they had it, one way or the other. I think that's the only way you can play team defense. I don't think it's the only way you can play as a team on offense. I think it's the only way you can play good special teams. Now, to get these three things, there's one prerequisite. Your team has got to be in good physical condition. Because when do people loaf? I loaf in my racquetball games that I have now when I get tired. That's when I loaf. Fatigue makes cowards of us all, is what Vince Lombardi said, and I believe him. So you're not going to be tough when you're tired, mentally or physically. When do you make the most mental mistakes, whether you know it or you don't know it? When you're tired. It doesn't have to be football. It doesn't have to be athletics. I mean, you make them at work or whatever. So all those things to me are intangibles that we always look for in our program. And you have to be willing to confront and demand people to get this. You have to make them run through the cone. You have to make them finish plays, not stop 2 feet short. You have to do that. I watch our coaches all the time. How they see guys doing things, but they don't say anything sometimes to certain guys. See it all the time. I wonder why. One good thing about coaching in pro football is I went to almost every college in the country. I mean, it'd have been in Mississippi, Mississippi Valley, Alcorn State, you name it, Norfolk State, everywhere in the world. The old coach at Norfolk State was about 67 years old. He'd been coaching there for almost 40 years. I said, what's your philosophy of coaching? He says, it's really pretty simple. If you see something happen on the field, and I'm quoting him, and you ain't coaching it, you letting it happen. And I really believe that. And I look at our team sometimes and our players sometimes, and I see that happening. We're not really coaching a guy to play that way, but he wants to play that way, undisciplined style, not finishing the play, not playing the proper technique, doesn't have the right eye control on what he's supposed to key or do, and we let it happen. And eventually, it hurts you in the game. because it leads to undisciplined performance. And all the checks and balances that you have built into your system, offense, defense, whatever it is, are going to go awry when a guy's not playing run pass if he's supposed to play that, he's not run support if he's supposed to do that, he's not staying inside out on the ball if he's supposed to do that, or whatever it is. So that's really important. A couple things here, guys, that I think are important. You have to reinforce positive performance. You have to. And you have to have it in your system to do it. Now, I was in charge at the Buckeye Leaves when I was at Ohio State, those things that everybody puts on their helmet. And there was guys that would actually compromise a victory to get another half a leaf on their helmet. I promise you that. It was the biggest pain in the ass job I ever had in all my 22 years of coaching. Bob, you were there. I mean, if Tim Spencer got 13 and a half, he wanted 14 and a half. I mean, if Sleester got 20 leaves, he wanted 21. It didn't make any difference what it was. Just like your wife, you know, if you give her 20, she wants 21. Dollars most of the time, but I think that's a way to do it, but that's kind of individualistic in manner, and the way we tried to do it is more in a team way. And you'll be amazed, and one thing that people don't understand about pro players is still they want the attention and they want to be reinforced for positive things that they do. I've seen guys bust their ass that made $3 million a year for a $100 bill if you put one up there on a production chart as who got the most production points in a week in Cleveland. Like they didn't have enough money to walk across the street and buy a cup of coffee. Unbelievable. It wasn't the 100. It was just the positive reinforcement they would get from their peers and the coaches and the other people in the organization if they got it, if they did it. So we always try to set up goals and things like that that will promote reinforcing positive performance. You have to have that. You have to have it. And there's a lot of ways to do it. But I think philosophically how you're structured helps you do that, even in your goal boards if you have them. And the first 2 years in Cleveland, we didn't have any of this stuff. We didn't use it. Bill didn't believe in it. Then the more he got involved in other things, the more I could do more things like we used to do them, so we had goals. The goals on defense were this. The first one is always to win. That's got to be the first one. The second one, because it's the truest measure of being a good defensive team, is to prevent the score. Doesn't make any difference how many yards they get, how many yards passing they get. It doesn't make any difference how many yards rushing they get. I think all those things are going to contribute to whether you do it. And I think all the things that we talk about contribute to being hard to score against. And that's the number one thing that I always wanted to hear as a defensive coordinator, which people would come and say, well, you guys are playing it. You are hard to score against. You're hard to score against. That's what you have to be. How many points do you give up? Now, I kind of think that 13 points a game, like in college, maybe it's less than that in high school relative to the rules and the skill players and guys running down the field on screens and all that stuff. I mean, the rules are there for them to score points. And I think if you really have a very good defense, like there was only one team in the Big Ten this year that gave up 13 or less points. And it wasn't a terrible defensive league of defensive teams or anything. You have to stop the run to be an effective defensive team. You have to. Now, we just put 3.3 yards per rush down. Because if you're playing a wishbone team, they might get 200 yards rushing, and that may be good. So it's how many yards per play they get that I think is a key. We put 5 yards per pass play. No more than 5 yards per pass play. That's all pass plays. And stats in college and with you guys in high school don't indicate that. If a guy gets sacked, that's a pass play. That should come off of passing yardage, not rushing yardage. And that's how it is, because then you truly know on the passing plays that they called, you gave up this many yards. These are the results of the passing plays. You have to get turnovers, because turnover ratio is one of the most significant factors in winning and losing. There's no question about it. If you give up big plays, you will not be hard to score against. Big plays to me are 20-yard passes or 15 or more yard runs. Third down efficiency. If you get off the field on third down and you concentrate and emphasize that part of your team, you'll be surprised how important it is. A lot of coaches, they keep playing the same thing on third down. You have to play the down and distance and the situation in the game and be able to get off the field. And red area efficiency is really important. Now, the staff that we have at Michigan State right now has never worked anywhere they've ever coached on playing differently in the red area. And everybody understands what I mean by the red area, the plus 20 in, going in, than they do out in the field. Play the same coverages, same stuff. Well, we don't play the same coverages, and we don't play the coverages the same way. I mean, we call cover 2 now red 2. We call 9 red 9 because it's different. The field shrinks. There's no vertical stretch anymore. So you should adapt your teaching and your philosophy and coaching to that. We went 15 quarters, I don't know if it's a record, 15 quarters in the league without giving up a touchdown in one stretch. It was over 3 or 4 games. And we were always in the first 3 in red area efficiency in Cleveland. And if you're good in the red area, that means you prevent the touchdown 60% of the time. 60% of the time you get out without giving them a touchdown. That's what we try to do. And we were always above that in Cleveland. They get inside the 20-yard line. We got out 60% of the time. Now, you saw Dallas' stats on the Super Bowl probably, that they score touchdowns in the red area, what was it, like 47% of the time. Well, you can only let them score touchdowns in the red area, if you're going to be good, 30% of the time. Because you'd be amazed that if they kick 5 field goals, the score is 15-0. If they score 5 touchdowns, it's 35-0. That's a big difference. In one situation, you've still given your team a chance to win. In the other one, you got no chance to win. Now, good third down efficiency, I didn't tell you that, I didn't mention this, is that 30% efficiency against you. In other words, 3 out of 10 times they make a first down. That's good. Now, our goals at Michigan State on offense are just the opposite of these. Because if these principles are important to winning on one side, then those principles are important on the other. Now, we have some little offshoots, like winning is still the #1 goal on offense. Scoring points, and we like to score 28 points in a game, is ours. Rushing the ball for more than 3.5 yards per carry. They have 4.0 down. They want to throw the ball with efficiency and not make turnovers and make enough big plays in the passing game that they're going to average 6 yards per pass play, which means you have to be able to protect the quarterback. If you're going to pass the ball, you have to be able to protect the quarterback. Their third down efficiency is 40%, and they want to score touchdowns 50% of the time in the red area at least. So that's just those are the principles to me that are going to affect the outcome of the game. Now, somebody could say, well, how come you don't have a goal for sacks? We did a study, and the teams that had the most sacks didn't play the best defense, and the teams that had the most sacks didn't win the most games. So that's not a significant goal toward winning and losing. I think all these things that I mentioned here are significant in affecting the outcome of the game, which that's the kind of goals that you want. Those are the kind of goals that you want. Now, how do you evaluate your team? Do you guys grade your players? Do you grade your players and say that you graded 88% in this game? Most people still do that. Do you do that, Bob? Still? We've always done it too. But the only thing that we never do anymore is ever tell a guy he has a percentage grade that gives him and makes him have a winning performance. And the reason for that is the first year we were at Michigan State, we go to Illinois, and Mike White was there, and they had a pretty good team then, and they beat us about 40-13. Kicked our butts good. We come back, we grade the film the next day, and the outside linebacker coach is in his meeting, and he gives his guys his grades, and he says, all right, Tim Moore, you played really well. You got 88%. That's a winning performance. I said, wait a while. We got beat 40-13. If we're going to have a team concept, there's nobody that can walk out of this room thinking that because they graded a certain amount, they have a winning performance. There's no way. Because you win as a team and you lose as a team. So what we grade for is consistency. And there's no winning or losing grades, performances. That was the end of that. That was the last time we ever had winning performance. Because it's not winning performance, it's what you think as a coach is enough consistency to win at the position. But consistency is only a part of being a good player. Production is really important as a player. Production. How many plays do you make? And we've all coached guys that don't do it like we'd like for them to do it, technique-wise, so you can give them a minus in the technique, but the results are good. Michael Dean Perry did not always play three technique exactly like we coached him, but he made as many plays doing it like we coached him as he did his own way. And there was always a negotiation going on there. Play the defense, two gap, 25% of the time. That's all I'll call it. I'll make sure when the day is done that you're only going to have to play two gap 1 out of every 4 plays. And we'll move you and let you do what you want to do the rest of the time. Now, Bill didn't have the flexibility to do that, but that's the only way. Otherwise, the guy was never going to play what you want him to play. Never. He saw himself as a one-gap player. He had great quickness, and he was, but he could do either one. So you compromise with the guy to get him to do what you want, but his consistency and his grade in the game was never good enough to be a winning performance, ever, because he never always played the defense disciplined like you would like for him to do technique-wise. But did he make enough plays for you to win? Most of the time. Most of the time. Now that sounds like a little bit of a contradiction, but he did. But consistency is important, but production is important. Now, we have a production chart, which this to me has been the best motivator for our players. It rewards the positive. It takes something away for the negative. And the players see, as a team, who is being a productive player. And it undresses the guy that's trying to bullshit everybody into what a good player he is when he's got 5 production points, when some other guy's got 162. Undresses him in front of the whole town because it's right there. And the grades arrive the same for everyone. And I don't have them all here, but I could give it to you. But it's a point system that reinforces positive plays. Example, you make a tackle, you get 2 points. You make an assist, you get 1 point. You cause a fumble, you get 3 points. You recover a fumble, you get 3 points. You pick the ball up and run it for a touchdown, you get 3 points. You make a block on a return, you get a point. You get a tackle for a loss, you get an extra point. You get a sack, you get 2 extra points. If you knock down a pass, you get a point. If I probably already said interception is 3 points. But all those things reinforce positive plays. All those things. Now, on the downside, you miss a tackle, it costs you 2. You get a penalty, it costs you 2. You get a no hustle, it costs you 1. You make a ME, mental mistake, it costs you 1. All those things cost you on the negative side because they hurt the team. Now, what you could do is reward a guy, if you really thought consistency was important, is guy grades 90% and you think that's good consistency, give him 3 points for that if you want to. Well, we didn't. But I'm going to tell you what, those guys used to come in that meeting room in Cleveland and they'd come around the corner and that's the first thing they'd look at. They almost run into me trying to see where they were on that chart. Every one of them. Didn't make any difference how much money they made or anything. And the 2 guys that were on top of the list, Pepper and Eric Turner, were the 2 leaders of the team. They were the 2 leaders of the team. In their way, they were the leaders of the team. Everybody respected them. They played hard in the games. They were good leaders in their own way. They took special handling at times, but they were good leaders in their own way. And that reinforced them in a positive way. Yeah. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any... one other thing I wanted to talk about, and we're going to take a break, is that production is important, but then I think there's a way to grade your defense or your offense which is better than giving grades to see if you're successful. You either win or lose every down and distance in the game. And I talk a lot from a defensive standpoint because that's what I've always coached. I played quarterback in high school, but just always coached defense. We take and we look at the play. We have a defense. 11 guys are supposed to do a job. Instead of saying it's 1st and 10, for us to be successful on the next down, we've got to make 2nd or 7 plus. We've got to make that next situation 2nd and 7 plus. So if they run a toss sweep and gain 5 yards and it's 2nd and 5, that is a loss for the defense. It's a loss. Why is it a loss? 58, Carl Banks got hooked. 39, the strong safety, got cut. The other 9 guys played the play great. We got everybody right gap control, getting off, running to the ball, second support by the corner, free safety running the alley. Everything's perfect. Well, why did we lose on that play? 58 got hooked, 39 got cut. Period. That's it. Then they start to see if we could just put a stone out there for contain 39, and just a damn stone. Don't have to move at all. Just get a stone where the guy has to run inside. Look at all the assholes that would tackle the ball carrier. And if you just, Banks, keep your ass outside, arm free right here, not that hard. You don't have to two-gap the guy and play it both ways. We've got another guy there, and then another guy here and another guy there. It promotes belief in your system and your scheme because the players can see that if we do it the way he's asking, I can see it'll work. It's not negative. It's just, and then if you have a defense that you played and Lawrence Phillips runs 50 yards for a touchdown and you don't have anybody that's screwed up, then you better throw that one out and never play it again. We had a couple of those in that game. So that's how we evaluate our defensive, and the offensive guys do a similar style thing by whether they win the down and distance war. And you're always going to create a better situation for yourselves, and it makes the players very aware of the situations in the game. In other words, when it's 3rd and 20, what's a victory for the defense? They give up 19 yards. As long as they have to punt, it really does promote awareness of situations with your team as well. And it really, if you're playing under defense and everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and they gain 5 yards, You know, everybody didn't screw up. It doesn't have to be a negative play for everybody. Maybe the guy cuts back and the backside will overran the play. Whatever it is, that's the problem with that particular play. And the players can really see that if they do it correctly, and they don't have to be supermen to do it correctly, that we have a chance to be successful. So that's pretty much the attitude part of it, guys. If you have any questions about anything, don't hesitate. We're going to take a 10-minute break or so, 15-minute break, and when we come back, I'm going to talk more about coverages and more football-oriented stuff.